Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Keke Coutee and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're talking about my Week 16 waiver wire targets for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're talking about waiver wire targets and breakout players that had incredible weeks, not even just in Week 15, but for the last couple weeks that you could pick up and potentially play coming in here in Week 16, the Fantasy Football Championships. For many of you, I want to say congratulations for getting this far, because not many teams can make it this far to the final week of the fantasy football season. Now, for those of you who do play in a Week 17 championship, we'll be here next week, but regardless, these are players that we're going to be talking about that had breakout weeks for the last couple weeks and could potentially be picked up and played based on their upcoming schedule, of course, and the matchups and the different circumstances. There's different injuries. There are different players that are not going to be played going forward, like a Julio Jones. Maybe Christian McCaffrey doesn't end up getting activated. There are players that we're going to have to just wait and see how this week progresses, see if they're going to be activated. I know Michael Thomas has gone to the injured reserve. There are players that are dropping like flies. So what do? We have to go ahead and adjust. We have to pick up players and try to set ourselves up for success. So before we begin, again, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but hopefully you picked up running back, handcuffs for the last couple weeks. The fact of the matter is, the running back position as of right now, there aren't that many players that off of this past week had incredible performances that aren't owned in many leagues. A lot of the handcuffs we're going to talk about today are owned in a majority of Yahoo formats that I see. Now, the wide receiver position, the quarterback position, there's so much volatility at those specific positions on a weekly basis. There are a lot of guys that end up becoming top 12 guys just on a random streak because of their schedule, or guys that just late because of this, the current circumstance. For example, Jalen Hurts taking the starting job, or Chad Hansen, the wide receiver for the Houston Texans, because of Will Fuller's absence, has been fantastic for the last 3 weeks. There are a lot of players that have been performing recently, and it's due to the different, variables that are taking place in fantasy football at this moment in time. But for running backs, it's a little thin. Either way, congratulations for getting this far. This is an absolute, success, in my opinion, if you can make it this far. But it's no longer a success if we don't win. Like Ricky Bobby said, you're either first or you're last. And to be honest, we're trying to get that championship this year, whether it's this week or next week for those of you. Either way, congratulations. Let's get into this, shall we? Now, before we begin, I want to thank all of you for supporting the channel, getting us to 36,000 subscribers this season again. This has been an incredible journey, and I'm glad for you guys who have been along on the ride with us that I've been able to help as much as possible. I know I make some bad takes, Cam Akers didn't show up. My Rams lost to the Jets yesterday. I'm coming off of a pretty bad Sunday, but it is what it is. We're just trying to capture some championships, help you guys out. We'll be doing live streams this upcoming Saturday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, along with a live stream at 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Sunday. So 2 streams this upcoming weekend. Don't forget that. Otherwise, happy holidays. Make sure everybody is on the same page there. Regardless, should be fun. Outside of that, I think we'll be good to go. Let's get into this, shall we? Some waiver wire pickups for Week 16 of the 2020 fantasy football season, beginning with the running backs. We start off with Tony Pollard, running back of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, yesterday during the live stream, it was made apparent to everyone that Ezekiel Elliott was going to be out. Now, he is the number one waiver wire pickup, in my opinion, if in fact Ezekiel Elliott is once again going to miss this upcoming week as the Dallas Cowboys take on the Philadelphia Eagles. We have a game in which Tony Pollard came off of 12 carries and 6 receptions, 18 total touches. That volume of touches is unbelievable. The fact that he had 9 targets out of the backfield against the 49ers is ridiculous on its own. The fact that he had over 120 all-purpose yards and 2 touchdowns in yesterday's contest, getting him a 28.2 fantasy point performance, is unbelievable. Now, during yesterday's live stream, I didn't anticipate that kind of a Tony Pollard opportunity and experience. I didn't expect 28 fantasy points. And you guys, for those of you who were there, you know that. I didn't have him ranked that high. I had him, I think, at 23 overall in the week. So that was just an unbelievable breakout performance. And I did say it in yesterday's stream. I do believe Tony Pollard is a better runner than Ezekiel Elliott. Now, they're trapped with Zeke because of that contract. But regardless, Tony Pollard, if he is the starting back of this team this week, is going to find success as he typically does. Only owned in 45% of leagues if he's available. Hopefully you grabbed him. We mentioned him in the last couple of weeks. Potentially, hopefully you had already picked him up by then. Either way, we're moving on to the number 2 running back for this week. It is Salvon Ahmed. So the running back of the Dolphins, even though he was questionable all the week, of course, he had missed multiple weeks due to an injury. He came back and he was incredible yesterday against the New England Patriots. This is the second running back that has gone for over 100 yards in back-to-back weeks. Cam Akers, of course, for the Rams on that Thursday night contest. And yesterday, the Miami Dolphins running back dominated with 23 carries for 122 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. This is also contingent on the fact that hopefully we don't see a return of Myles Gaskin. If Myles Gaskin returns, then there's a potential that Salvon Ahmed's overall productivity and or value could diminish this upcoming week. But The fact that they play against the Las Vegas Raiders is an incredible task because, again, they're giving up some of the most points to opposing running backs on a weekly basis thus far this season. Of course, I know a lot of you who played Eckler this past week didn't get a great performance out of him, but that was mainly because Kalen Ballage came in and stole a touchdown. As of right now, Ahmed is only, I think, owned in 34% of Yahoo leagues. That is pretty wide range availability. If he can be picked up and played this week, I think he is a fantastic option. We'll see it on tomorrow's running back rankings, but either way, he's a good pickup and play. We have Le'Veon Bell as our number 3. Again, we talked about handcuffs. He is the handcuff to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And the fact of the matter is Clyde Edwards is going to potentially be missing the rest of the regular season as he's dealing with a knee injury. Of course, it kind of got folded over himself, and that in itself is typically not a good sign. But luckily for Le'Veon Bell, he came in and he played well against the New Orleans Saints, getting himself a good amount of touches, 15 touches on the ground for 62 yards. They had a little bit of a backyard football play in which Patrick Mahomes ran the ball, then pitched it out. And Le'Veon Bell find the end zone. That's great. They play against Atlanta this upcoming week. I know Atlanta's run-stop defense has been fantastic. Leonard Fournette still ended up scoring 2 touchdowns yesterday in that contest for them. So that was great. But I honestly think that regardless of who's playing against Atlanta, the fact that you are the starting running back of the Kansas City Chiefs, that in itself gives you incredible value. We know Le'Veon Bell has the ability to also catch the ball. He has himself a pretty good chance to being a great player this week in the matchup. We have Jeff Wilson Jr. as the number 4 option. Again, Raheem Mostert's still getting injured, still getting banged up. And Jeff Wilson came in clutch yesterday. Now, even though he did come in clutch, he had himself 60 rushing yards, had himself a rushing touchdown. We'll take that. I don't mind 12 fantasy points. That's what we wanted. We wanted safe pickings, and that's what we got there. My only issue is that if, in fact, Raheem Mostert is going to, one of these times get the rushing touchdown and Jeff Wilson doesn't, therein lies the instability of this backfield and the potential that, Jeff Wilson gets screwed over. Now, I know Jeff Wilson had multiple red zone rushing attempts yesterday. He even had one from like the 15-yard line. He took 12 yards. He almost fell into the end zone. Could have had 2 rushing touchdowns yesterday. But that being said, there's always a little bit of, inherent instability in this backfield based on how many mouths there are to feed and how this offense has kind of been rotating and how many injuries that have taken place. I know Jeff Wilson's currently questionable because he's been a little banged up, but either way, I think he's not a bad option going forward into this week. Chase Edmonds is our number 5. Again, Kenyon Drake was a no-show this last week. I know Kenyon Drake going into the week, he himself was already a little banged up. He was dealing with an injury. I think he, kind of re-aggravated that a little bit, and that is why Chase Edmonds had to come in. They were leading that entire game. So don't get it mistaken. They were leading the game, and Chase Edmonds really had to come in to take over because there wasn't any sort of production coming out of the rushing attempts that Kenyon Drake had. I mean, this is the most rushing attempts I've seen Chase Edmonds have in a while. He had 11 rushing attempts for 47 yards, 3 catches for 19 yards, and a touchdown. Again, if Kenyon Drake is going to be a little bit banged up or questionable, maybe even missed this week against the 49ers, this could be a great sign for Chase Edmonds. I know he's owned in a majority of leagues, but just wanted to mention him. The last guy I wanted to mention is Frank Gore, running back of the New York Jets. Frank Gore was unstoppable yesterday. Had himself 59 rushing yards, had himself a rushing touchdown, 1 catch for 6 yards, 13 fantasy points. We'll take that any day of the week. That is RB2 territory. And the fact that he was able to accomplish that against the Rams defense means that I'm 100% confident that he could easily do that against the Cleveland Browns defense. The Jets are coming off of a win. They probably don't have to win ever again. They'll feel good about it, and they can just ride off into the sunset. Now, they're not in the conversation of being one of the worst teams in NFL history. But that being said, I think Frank Gore is not a bad option as it pertains to being a fantasy football pickup and potential play. I think he's only played or picked up in 20% of leagues as of right now in Yahoo. So he's definitely widely available for those of you who are interested and or might not have a running back option this week. We move on to the wide receiver position. So the wide receiver position as of the last couple of weeks hasn't really had that many names that I was willing to 100% double down on and say, let's do it. Let's pick up all these guys. But this week I have 9 names because, again, this is one of the final weeks. And I don't know what's available in your league, so I wanted to go ahead and throw out as many names as possible in order to give you guys a little bit of a understanding as to what I think should be picked up and played. So number 1, first and foremost, is Russell Gage. This is 3 consecutive weeks in a row for the Atlanta Falcons in which he scored a touchdown. I mean, could we ask for more? He plays against the Kansas City Chiefs. Matt Ryan looked incredible yesterday. This is the Matt Ryan. He's very bipolar. One week he's awful, throwing 3 interceptions. The next week he's playing against an even better defense and just lighting them up. But of course, Matt Ryan has to throw leads. But that being said, I think Russell Gage, not a bad option at all. He's been fantastic, 10 plus points each of the last 3 weeks. And he continues to double down on that as long as Julio is going to continue to miss. Todd Gurley isn't relevant, so they're throwing the ball the entire time in Atlanta. That should be the case this week. That is why Russell Gage continues to be our number 1. Keke Coutee is our number 2. Again, this is a player that in the last 3 weeks has either had over 100 receiving yards or a receiving touchdown in each of his games. So again, the first game that he played, when Will Fuller went down against Indianapolis, he had 140 plus receiving yards. The next game against Chicago, had himself a receiving touchdown, unfortunately fumbled. But then this past week, once again playing against the Indianapolis Colts, had himself 5 catches, 51 yards, and a receiving touchdown, only owned in 41% of leagues. This is a player that, again, with Deshaun Watson, is finding a lot of value. They play against the Cincinnati Bengals this upcoming week. I cannot complain. I think Keke Coutee, as we continue, is going to be more and more of a valuable option, half PPR, full PPR formats, scoring touchdowns, getting big yardage plays. The opportunity is definitely there. The next player I wanted to mention is Chad Hansen, a teammate of Keke Coutee on the Houston Texans. Chad Hansen, along with the fact that, of course, Brandon Cooks has been dealing with an injury and Will Fuller was suspended, Chad Hansen is really taking advantage of this, this opportunity that he's had. Even though Chad Hansen's only owned in 2% of fantasy leagues right now, he has really been a productive part of this offense, scoring 9+ fantasy points each of the last 3 games. Against the Indianapolis Colts, had himself a fantastic game, over 100 receiving yards the first time they played against them. Just this past weekend against the Indianapolis Colts, 55 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. He has found himself a lot of stability in this offense as that number 2 receiving option. And on the opposite side of, where Brandon Cooks plays. When Brandon Cooks is pulling coverage, Chad Hansen's finding himself open with a lot of opportunities. And to be honest, not a bad option going forward against Cincinnati this upcoming week. Emmanuel Sanders is our number 4. And even though in the picture, Emmanuel Sanders, one of his shoulders are completely missing. I don't know why he took the picture like that, but regardless, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that Michael Thomas will be on the injured reserve until the end of the regular season, going into the actual NFL playoffs. So where does that leave the receiving core of the New Orleans Saints? In my opinion, it leaves it in the direction of getting Emmanuel Sanders more touches. We've seen it earlier this season. Drew Brees likes to spread the ball out, right? So there's no guarantee that Emmanuel Sanders is going to be a stud receiving option. That's why he's at number 4, because again, he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunity to make me think that, yeah, he's 100% a pickup and play. He is coming off of an exciting game against the Kansas City Chiefs this past week, in which he had 5 targets, 4 receptions for 76 yards. It was a pretty good game back and forth. Drew Brees did not play well, was very inefficient early in that game. If Drew Brees continues to get a little bit more back into the game, gets more practice under his belt, I guarantee you he'll be better, and in turn, potentially Emmanuel Sanders will be better. But again, playing against the Minnesota Vikings this week, it could be a very good opportunity for this team, and specifically Emmanuel Sanders, to have himself a pretty good performance here. We have Jakobi Meyers as a number 5. Again, Jakobi Meyers had a great game. Over 100 receiving yards, over 10 targets. We'll take that any day of the week. But the question is, can we find consistency here from Jakobi Meyers? This upcoming week, this team takes on the Buffalo Bills. The last time Jakobi Meyers played against them, had over 10 targets, had himself over 10 fantasy points. We have found stability him in this matchup. So in my opinion, if he continues to at least catch the ball as much as he has, it's going to be hard for the New England Patriots, who have been mathematically eliminated from the NFL playoffs, to keep up with Josh Allen in that offense, or be able to at least keep up with the running game, because anybody can run against the New England Patriots at this current moment in time. So I think Jakobi Meyers will benefit from the fact that Cam Newton, or whoever is the starting quarterback at that time, is going to be throwing the ball the entire time, and is going to be going in his direction. Only owned at 31% of leagues, not a bad option. We have Mecole Hardman as our number 6. So he saw a lot of targets yesterday. A lot of them were a couple pass interferences, a couple overthrown balls, a couple underthrown balls from Patrick Mahomes. I think they'll get back on the same page. He had 9 targets, 3 catches. He had a receiving touchdown. To be honest, if you go ahead and you attach a couple more of those deep bombs, you connect on one of those, you end up either getting an extra 60 yards or a 60-yard catch and a receiving touchdown. So there's a lot of upside with a player like this. Playing against Atlanta, that is one of the easiest matchups you could possibly ever have. So if you are looking for a high upside play, that's what Hardman presents this week, especially considering you are Kansas City, and they're not going to really have that much of a difficulty scoring against that Atlanta secondary. Should be a pretty easy slate this upcoming week. We move on to Tyron Johnson. So this is contingent on whether or not we are going to see Mike Williams and or Keenan Allen play. I know they played on Thursday, and both of them are dealing with injuries. If, in fact, we get a little bit of a setback and Tyron Johnson is going to continue to be the starting guy for this team, he's coming off of back-to-back weeks in which he has scored a touchdown, once against the Atlanta Falcons, and then this past week against the Las Vegas Raiders on Thursday Night Football. Plays against the Denver Broncos. Of course, we saw Josh Allen torch and go nuclear against that defense. I think Tyron Johnson, if he's given said opportunity, should be able to find some success this week. We move on to Greg Ward. Caught himself 2 receiving touchdowns this past week against the Arizona Cardinals, and that's 3 receiving touchdowns just along with Jalen Hurts in the last 3 weeks. He obviously caught one in that game against the Green Bay Packers when Jalen Hurts was brought into the contest late in the second half. So again, Greg Ward's kind of been his red zone threat. Now, does that 100% mean that he's a pick up and play? Probably not. I don't really want to start Greg Ward in my fantasy playoffs, but if you're playing in a deeper league, 14, 16, 18 teams, maybe you need to go ahead and pick up a player like Greg Ward, start him because you have 6 flex spots or something. I don't know. I just wanted to mention him because, again, if he's getting that much opportunity down in the red zone, he's playing majority of the snaps at the wide receiver position, there is a lot of opportunity for even more upside in terms of receiving yards to give him more stability. So I think not a bad play. The last option I wanted to mention is Darnell Mooney, wide receiver of the Chicago Bears. Now, we know Mitch Trubisky has been playing fantastic as the last couple of weeks, and this upcoming week they play against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That should be an automatic success. I mean, Lamar Jackson even threw 3 passing touchdowns against them. We had guys like Boykin and even Dez Bryant catching receiving touchdowns against the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary. So regardless of who's playing against them, I think Darnell Mooney could easily find himself some success. He scored a couple touchdowns as the last couple of weeks. He's obviously the number 2 receiving option of that team. I know everybody's playing secondary to the David Montgomery experience that is going on there in Chicago, but either way, Darnell Mooney, not a bad option. We move on to our tight end position as we begin with George Kittle as our number 1 pickup. Now, if George Kittle hasn't been picked up, then you haven't been watching this show for the last couple weeks. I've been mentioning it every single week since, I don't even know, I want to say since before even week 13 took place, I was mentioning George Kittle. We had to have already picked him up because he is going to potentially play this upcoming week. And if that's the case, playing against the Arizona Cardinals, George Kittle is going to get himself 7 to 8 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. That's literally what he's capable of. He will easily be a top 4 tight end, potentially top 2 if Jaron Waller wants to, disappear because if I don't know. We'll see. But regardless, the whole thing is George Kittle needs to have already been picked up. I know I think they owned in about 60, high 60s, low 70% of leagues. That's what I'm pretty aware of. But again, if he's already been picked up, don't worry about it. We move on to the next tight end, which is Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper gets the privilege to play against the Jets this upcoming week. We've talked about it. The Jets are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends this season. They just gave up a touchdown to Tyler Higbee, giving him 10-plus points this past weekend. And to be honest, if Austin Hooper, who's coming off of a pretty good game himself, one of the better contests that he's had in quite some time, to be honest, I think he can easily find himself in a pretty advantageous matchup and scoring a lot of fantasy points for owners this week. We have Tyler Higbee as our number 3. Again, I just mentioned he is coming off of the last couple of weeks in which he has found a lot of productivity. I know he didn't play well against the New England Patriots. That's mainly because, again, the Bill Belichick, stopping the tight end position and the fact that they didn't have to even throw the ball in that game because Cam Akers was doing all the work. In this contest against the Seattle Seahawks, I think it should be a competitive one. We just saw Logan Thomas catch the ball, 9-10 times and just dominate that secondary. I mean, Logan Thomas did whatever he wanted with Dwayne Haskins yesterday. The tight end position could be a viable option against Seattle. I'm sure McVay will be watching the film and thinking about using Tyler Higbee in that form. We move on to the last couple options here. We have Dan Arnold. Dan Arnold honestly hasn't been bad. I think he had, 5 catches last week, 50-plus yards. To be honest, he's not a bad option. If he scores a touchdown, he has upside. Of course, he can get up to 10 points. But again, I don't think he's a terrible option there. He's found himself, catching touchdowns here and there as in the last couple of weeks, finding himself more and more involved in this offense. He keeps on doing this every back end of a season. Whether it was even last season, he was pretty relevant in the fantasy football playoffs because he had found some pretty good performances here and there. But either way, I think Dan Arnold continues to be relevant in this offense as long as Kyler Murray keeps looking in his direction. I want to also mention Jared Cook. I know he was a no-show yesterday, but that's just how Jared Cook works. Every time you want to trust in him, he disappears. Every time we lose trust in him, he's scoring touchdowns, and that's just the fact of the matter. Plays against Minnesota. The last time he played against Minnesota was against them in the playoffs last year. He had 5 catches, 54 yards. I think, again, Minnesota, they do give up the fair share of points to opposing tight ends. Could be a possibility of him finding success there. But I think there is a potential that if you're in a bad enough spot at the tight end position and you need to pick up a Jared Cook, then he should be potentially available for you this week. Cole Kmet is the last option I wanted to mention. Again, if Jimmy Graham is going to be banged up, he's not going to get as much work, and they're going to play against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Everybody scores against Jacksonville. They've given up the most, I think, the second most touchdowns in the National Football League, only behind the New York Jets. I think they've given up 13 touchdowns to opposing tight ends in the first 15 weeks. I mean, anybody scoring against them, Cole Kmet could very easily do so this upcoming week. We move on to the quarterback position, and the player that is honestly taking over fantasy right now, it's Jalen Hurts. Hopefully you picked him up last week if you had the opportunity to do so, and just kind of stash him on your bench. My goodness. When I put him on the middle of my thumbnail last week, I didn't think, oh, you know what, Jalen Hurts is going to be, a 40-point monster. I thought, okay, He's a popular name. He's got the ability to run the ball. I love quarterbacks that are mobile and can get points on the ground. We always talk about that every single week. But my goodness, was he unstoppable this last week. He only completed 24 of his 44 passes, but he still had 338 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 63 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown. Plays against Dallas' defense this week. I know Nick Mullins was a mess. CJ Beathard had to come in late in that game because of how many turnovers took place. But I think Jalen Hurts could honestly put up a number against Dallas and be an easy championship-winning quarterback this week. The next quarterback I wanted to mention is another rookie, Tua Tagovailoa. So here's the thing. Tua at this point, he's an efficient quarterback. 20 for 26 passing, had himself 145 passing yards against a very good secondary. Of course, Stephon Gilmore left that game with a season-ending injury. He's gone. So I don't really have to worry about Josh Allen this week and Stephon Diggs as long as they're both healthy. Even John Brown, they should be fine. But regardless, Tua takes on the Las Vegas Raiders. We know the Las Vegas Raiders, they cannot stop a soul. If Mike Gesicki comes back, we get Devontae Parker back. If we get Jakeem Grant back, Myles Gaskin, there could be so many pieces coming back into this offense, ready to put up a huge number against Las Vegas. This should be a pretty good contest. I think Tua, not a bad option as a quarterback play this week. We have Baker Mayfield playing against the New York Jets. I know Jared Goff was awful, but Jared Goff still finished with 2 passing touchdowns, even regardless of how bad he played for a majority of that contest. As of right now, Baker Mayfield in the last 2 games has been unstoppable playing against the Baltimore Ravens and the New York Giants. I know yesterday on Sunday Night Football, it was a little bit of a boring, slow game, but he was 27 of 32 passing with 297 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. I think this upcoming week against the Jets could very easily put up an even bigger number against them as Rashard Higgins and Jarvis Landry, and even a little bit of sprinkles, like we mentioned earlier, of Austin Hooper taking over. The next quarterback I wanted to also mention, Mitch Trubisky, playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's easy. Anybody can score against them. That's an automatic pickup and play. There's so many good matchups this week for quarterbacks that I just wanted to mention them all. Trubisky, again, has been playing better and better as the weeks have progressed. And to be honest, he's kind of earning himself a little bit of a job there. But I think David Montgomery's helping him out a lot regardless. We also have Phillip Rivers as a number 5. That's, I think, 6 consecutive weeks of 2 passing touchdowns for Phillip Rivers. He has found himself a beautiful stride going into the fantasy playoffs. Plays against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is a little bit concerning because, again, Pittsburgh does get after quarterbacks. The mobility challenges of a Phillip Rivers could definitely hurt him. But to be honest, I think he'll still be fine. The weakest part of that defense is obviously their secondary. If you can go ahead and throw against the Pittsburgh Steelers, you can find success and win that game. The last quarterback I wanted to mention is Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota will take on Tua Tagovailoa. This is a Hawaiian quarterback game. This is going to be a pretty exciting one. Derek Carr is going to be probably out for the rest of the season. Marcus Mariota is going to have to continue to prove that he is a viable quarterback. The fact that he had 88 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, along with 1 passing touchdown, 226 passing yards against the Los Angeles Chargers defense, just coming off of the bench. I mean, that proves enough to me that he is a capable enough quarterback to earn his job and continue to fight and maybe be a fantasy option. If you play in a super deep league, potentially super flex format, the option is on the table. The last thing I wanted to mention is defenses for this week. I'll just go ahead and just quickly go through them. I like the Cardinals this week because, again, playing against the 49ers, that offense has struggled. They turned over the ball a lot last week. They made Dallas's defense look like they were elite. We also have the Washington football team this upcoming week. I think the Washington football team, their front 7, their defense, they've been playing out of their minds. They play against Carolina. I know the Carolina Panthers have found it, pretty tough in the last couple weeks. They're finding it very difficult to score. Teddy Bridgewater is not scoring touchdowns, and that in itself could be a problem because this could be a revenge game for the head coach, Ron Rivera, going against his former team. It's going to be an exciting one. The Chicago Bears playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know Gardner Minshew was relevant, but still, I think the Bears could definitely get after them, cause a lot of trouble for Gardner Minshew, forcing turnovers. We have the Carolina Panthers playing against the Washington football team. I think vice versa. I think Dwayne Haskins could very easily make some mistakes and could obviously, turn over the ball here and there. I know Carolina in the last couple of weeks have been getting torched, but in terms of defenses that aren't owned in very many leagues, it could be suggested we're at the bottom of the barrel here. We'll have the last 2 options who are both playing against each other. We have the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys in the last 2 weeks have had 10-plus fantasy points, scoring touchdowns, causing turnovers. The Philadelphia Eagles have progressively gotten better, but their secondary is not healthy. If they can get healthy for this week, they could potentially pose a threat. Either way, these are the best defenses, in my opinion, that aren't owned in very many leagues at this current moment in time. I'd obviously mention Cleveland and Miami and Buffalo, but these are defenses that should have already been picked up and have been started and played for the last couple of weeks, so I don't want to mention them. Anyway, those are my Week 16 waiver wire targets for the 2020 fantasy football season. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Tomorrow, we'll begin with our rankings as the week progresses with running backs. I appreciate you guys supporting the channel. Let's capture some 2020 fantasy football championships, and until next time, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys enjoy the game tonight. Peace.